ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य। O Ramakrishna, establisher of religion universal, Sarvadharma Swarupine, and embodiment of all the religions of the world, Avatara Varishtaya, and the noblest of all the incarnations, Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. So I offer my salutations to you. So this Pranava mantra, Swami Vivekananda composed. Through this he defined his Guru. Who is his Guru? Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. And what is he? Sthapakaya cha dharmasya, to establish universal religion. Sarvadharma Swarupane, and to harmonize all the religions, to harmonize all the spiritual paths. He had incarnated, and Avatara Varishtaya describes him as the best of the incarnations. So how he is the best of the incarnations, we shall try to explore a little. Tomorrow we are celebrating the birthday of Sri Ramakrishna, 186th birthday of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa we will be celebrating tomorrow. So, those of you who have read the life of Sri Ramakrishna already know the facts. Facts as facts are not that important. How can we relate ourselves to the facts? What we can gain from those facts? What we can gain from the life of Sri Ramakrishna? We shall try to explore a little. So the name of the topic is Sri Ramakrishna, a spiritual phenomenon. Sri Ramakrishna, a spiritual phenomenon. He was a spiritual scientist par excellence. He explored that realm of spirituality in all its aspects. So we have our own aspects, right, in life. We explore the material world. We want money, we want wealth, we want material things. We are exploring in our own way. But Sri Ramakrishna had taken a different direction. His field of activity was not this material world. He wanted to explore that realm of spirit, the realm which transcends the senses, that realm which is beyond the mind, the realm which is eternal. So however we may gain, whatever we may gain from this world, all will go away, because one day we are going away from this world, right? So he had thought, in fact India has been a spiritual land. Spiritual land means people are not interested in material things as much as they are interested in spirituality and transcendental things. Things that bring you eternal life, things that bring you eternal peace, things that bring you immortality. That has been our search, that has been our quest. Our forefathers have lived only for this ideal. Of course, today we are in a mode of imitation. And so we have imported a lot of materialism from the West and we are just aping them. There's a different story. So before we proceed to study Sri Ramakrishna, I would like to just discuss the topic under 4 headings. First, what necessitated the advent of Sri Ramakrishna? What necessitated the advent of Sri Ramakrishna? The second is his childhood and his sadhana. Third, his main teachings, the core of his philosophy. And fourth, what Vivekananda has said on Sri Ramakrishna. Because we will not be able to understand Sri Ramakrishna with our intellect. As far as we know, as far as I understand, the greatest man, in the recent history, in terms of intellect, somebody whose intellect had reached the peak, you can say, it was Vivekananda. And what Vivekananda said about Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, we have to believe him because his words are actually absolute. Vivekananda was not an ordinary man. His intellect was a razor sharp intellect, but he sat at Sri Ramakrishna's feet for years together. So to understand Sri Ramakrishna, we have to go by the words of Vivekananda, the foremost among the sannyasin disciples of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. We all know Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa had both sannyasin and householder disciples. Of course, sannyasin disciples, I'm not saying this as a sannyasi. Many householder devotees also had attained to extraordinary spiritual heights. But the sannyasin disciples, of course, had all become self-realized souls. The foremost among them was Swami Vivekananda, and what he has said on his Guru Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, we shall explore a little. First, what necessitated the advent of Sri Ramakrishna? We have this sloka in the Bhagavad Gita, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirбhavati bharata. As and when dharma declines, the Lord has given an assurance in this country that I would take an embodiment, I would incarnate myself, I will descend onto the earth to re-establish dharma. It's an assurance from the Lord. So it is always like a wavy fashion it moves. Sometimes there will be a peak of materialism and spirituality declines, dharma declines, our body consciousness will increase, and we will think the physical comforts, bodily comforts as the sole aim and objective of life. We will proceed. That's how actually the world goes. That means dharma automatically declines. The more body conscious you become, the more actually bodily comforts and pleasures become the sole objective of life, the lesser the spiritual inclination automatically, right? So, we today, because we are living in a society, human being is a social animal, somebody said, some great man. We live for the society, and the aspirations of the majority become the aspiration of everybody practically, because very few people are original in this world. Okay? Original thinkers we say, but there are very few. So if everybody learns to reflect on his or her own, and what I really want in this life, okay? Whom I should take as a role model or icon, whom actually we are considering as the Mahatmas or the great Purushas. Okay, automatically all these great people would be in front of us, right? If you don't take the society in which you live into cognizance. The majority of the people who are around, if you don't take into them as into cognizance, if their objectives and their aspirations and their goals should not become your goals, right? You just think for yourself, whom we are revering as the greatest people in the world. You just see 5,000 years or 2,500 years of human history. The Upanishadic period actually, it was prehistoric, post-Buddha. From Buddha onwards you just see whom we remember, all the sages and saints, right? We revere them as the great people. We revere them as the people who had experienced God. We revere them as the people who had attained something very great. That's the reason we remember them. And if you really reflect on that and take them as your role models in life, your life would become blessed. But today we don't have that strength because what my fellow human being does, what he thinks, what he chooses as his goals or objectives, they become my goals and objectives also. Because I am not that original, I don't have that much of strength to resist society or the majority. So, materialism actually took ground, or was about to take ground, because we were under also foreign subjugation. 1,000 years of slavery almost, 900 years of slavery, let us say, continuous political subjugation. The people had lost faith in themselves. India had lost faith in itself. Country and people are one and the same, right? India had lost faith in itself means the people of the nation had lost faith in their time-tested spiritual, cultural and moral values. The race started feeling that why we have become so low, why we have become so degraded, why actually we are lagging behind in progress, why other countries are marching ahead, where have we gone wrong? Everybody started reflecting, particularly educated people, educated intelligentsia. Calcutta was the capital of India at that time. So they all have come to the conclusion, as it were, that our religion is at fault. Our spirituality, people in fact were practicing superstitions, not religion as such, religion proper, spirituality proper. They were holding on to superstition and they thought actually that was religion highest. And because of the degradation had come. And now they started putting the blame on spirituality. Spirituality has principles, not many were practicing. And so they started looking towards the West. Western societies have become progressive, they're marching ahead, and all the beliefs and traditions and customs that we have been holding for centuries are irrational and superstitious. The sooner we give up them, the better for us. That's what actually the conclusion an average man has come to. And our spiritual history actually not a 1 day history or 10 days history or 10 years history or centuries history. It has been the history of millennia. It has been the history of millennia. For millennia we are exploring the spiritual dimensions of life. So all the wealth of knowledge that we have developed, people started feeling it is all useless. It is all actually poet's imagination, a figment of imagination of a lazy person kind of thing. So people who were lazy, who were not interested to work, they just actually concocted something, wrote something. That's all our philosophy and spirituality is all about. And so what we need to do to take the country forward, we need to imitate the West. Like that we have to have industries, we have to have material development, we have to have Abhyudaya, progress in the same way, in the same lines as they have been doing. That means India wanted to become just like another materialistic country. The British came and they said that you are all barbarians. You are not just poor, you are barbarians, you are uncivilized. We ought to civilize you. We have come to civilize you. That they went on telling and we believed. We have come to civilize you. You just see us, how prosperous we are, how progressive we are. And also our religion is great because we are all Christians. Because God has favored us. And you ought to take our religion also. And also they started their own brand of monotheism. They started preaching here. Because we are all polytheists. We are actually worship many gods and we worship one God. And that God has favored us. That's why we are progressive, we are prosperous, we are wealthy, we are rich. And so you take and adopt our religion and you will become rich like us. God will favor you too. So they came and started preaching this. Not just a political colonization. The evangelization also was taking place. And Hindus started losing faith in himself totally, in his knowledge, in his spiritual wisdom, in his time-tested values, everything that we have of inferior quality, everything West has of superior quality. Not only the political thought, the spiritual thought and the religious thought of the West actually started dominating the East. And then at that critical point of time, the divine understood that the only country that has true spirituality, which is not a faith, which is not a dogma, religion or spirituality as a science, that is this nation. And the people of this country started losing faith in itself. Then what is the salvation for the world? Religion is a science. It will be lost once for all. And so as promised in the Bhagavad Gita, yada yada hi dharmasya glanirбhavati, the Lord actually descended, incarnated, came down to this earth to re-establish dharma, to instill faith in us about our own spiritual culture and spiritual traditions and the importance and the value of it and the reality of part of it, real part of it. There is a lot of, Christians have always actually get into that. Many superstitions people are practicing in the name of true religion. So in 1836 it happened. The divine incarnation was born. You know the vision that Sri Ramakrishna had. And he was a small boy in Saptarshi Mandala. Vivekananda was sitting as one of the sages. So he went and embraced gently his neck. And then he said, I am going to the earth and you also must come with me. A great difficulty, Vivekananda, the sage meditating. And deep meditation, he opened his eyes and he nodded his assent. And that's how actually the advent of the incarnation had taken place. Where was he born and what was his father, Sri Ramakrishna's father? Shudiram Chattopadhyaya. What was he? He was a poor Brahmin. He was a very truthful person. Why Sri Ramakrishna was born only in that family? A devout and a truthful person. Not a rich man, not even a middle class man. A lower middle class, you can say, but very particular about practicing truth. He was in another village. That village, a landlord usurped his land and banished him from that village. And he told him, I will give your land back if you are prepared to tell a lie, if you depose in a lawsuit and tell this, then I would give you a land back. But Kshudiram Chattopadhyay said that I cannot tell a lie. So he left the village and came to this Kamarpukur, where Sri Ramakrishna was born. Before Sri Ramakrishna was born, Kshudiram Chattopadhyay had gone to Gaya. You know the place in Bihar, where actually Lord Vishnu is Gadadhara. He is taking the worship of the Lord, devotees. So, to offer our Shraddha, to means Pitru Devatas, forefathers, it has been the belief for centuries. People go there and offer this Shraddha to forefathers and worship Vishnu and then come back. And Sri Ramakrishna also felt, Sri Ramakrishna's father, Kshudiram, also thought that this is due from me, that I have to pay my respects and I have to offer my worship to my forefathers and I have to go to Gaya. So he went to Gaya and there he had a vision. In that vision he saw the Lord Vishnu appear to him and like a green, light green complexion body. He had a vision. He was just sleeping, tired, in the temple precincts, and then he had the vision. The Lord said that he saw all his Pitru Devatas in Vaikuntha. Lord was sitting on a throne. On both sides his Pitru Devatas was standing there in luminous forms and with folded hands. And Sri Ramakrishna prostrated before the Lord, that green complexion body of Lord Vishnu. And then Lord said he was pleased with Kshudiram and he said, Kshudiram, I am impressed with your devotion. I will be born as your son. Then Kshudiram said, Oh Lord, you will be born in my family. I am so poor. How can I take care of you? How can I feed you? So please don't be born in my family. So Lord is saying that I will be born in your family, but he is saying, please don't be born in my family. I will not be able to take care of you. I will not be able to serve you. If there is any deficiency in your service, actually, I will get the curse. I will be incurring your wrath. So please, I will be incurring the wrath, and so please, don't be born. And the Lord said, don't worry. Whatever you give, I will be happy with that. I will be contented with that. Okay? I will take birth in your family. That's how actually, that he had the vision, and then Kshudiram comes back home. And you know, Chandramani Devi, Sri Ramakrishna's mother, had many visions. And one day when she was there in front of the Shiva temple, a luminous light came out of that Shiva Linga and entered into her body, and that luminous light only became a child in her womb, and that was Sri Ramakrishna. After his birth, because morning shows the day, so they could understand he was born with that intense dispassion. As a child, he just rolled, a small kid, a few months, he was just rolled, and then where he went? Into the fireplace. So his body got automatically besmeared with the ash of the fireplace. And Sri Ramakrishna from childhood, he would take interest in sadhus. There was one Dharmadas Laha. They actually had given one house. On the outskirts of the village, there was one house, and that house actually they had given to sadhus. Many sadhus from North India, even still actually the tradition is being maintained. They visit Ganga Sagar, the place where Ganga merges into the sea. They make a pilgrimage, particularly in summer months. They come all the way from the north to Ganga Sagar. So on their way, they would stop at different places. In those days, these dharmasthalas, way stations would be there, where actually they will take some rest and then they move forward. Okay, you have to go by walk only. No other transport was available. Bullock cart and walk. Horse carriages are also very costly. Horse carriages also came later. It was in 1830s. I don't think even horse carriages were there. So, and also roads are not like present roads. So sadhus mostly, they would go by only, and they would go on foot only. And so they would come and take rest in this rest house, which that Dharmadas Laha had given. And Sri Ramakrishna as a boy would go to that place and he would serve them. Somehow, some natural attraction towards the sadhus. It was men of renunciation. Because, previous birth incarnation, men of renunciation. Spiritually inclined soul, right? So these sadhus are for God. They want to actually explore the spiritual dimension of life. And Sri Ramakrishna naturally got inclined towards them. He would go and serve them. They were pleased with him. They would bless him. One day, actually, they put ashes on him, actually. As a boy, he went there. They took fun. And he comes back and his mother was worried, Chandramani Devi. And my son might become a sannyasi, might leave me. And Sri Ramakrishna afterwards decided not to go to them. And then the sadhus come to their house and they give an assurance. Oh, such a small boy will not take as a sadhu. Oh, mother, you don't have to worry about that. So without your permission, we will not actually take him away. And we will not actually take him with us. So they had given us their assurance. Afterwards, his father Kshudiram passed away. And Sri Ramakrishna could see the transitoriness of the world. As a boy also, he had that keen insight. He would observe things. Today, children are preoccupied with so many things. Now they have video games to play all the time. So many things are there. So they don't observe things as keenly. Otherwise, children are in general, they observe things very keenly. But Sri Ramakrishna would observe everything very keenly. So he would pay a lot of attention to even to small things. So when he saw his mother, how she was when his father passed away, probably, right? So naturally she was dejected and depressed and crestfallen. The husband passed away, the whole responsibility came upon her, and her eldest son, Ramkumar, the responsibility devolved upon him, financial responsibility of the family. Sri Ramakrishna had actually an elder to him, one sister, Katyayani, and also two brothers, Ramkumar and Rameshwar. And so the entire responsibility fell upon the eldest son, Ramkumar. And mother actually, so naturally, was very much dejected, and she saw why so much suffering in the world. As a boy also, he would take interest in listening about Puranas, and he would read Puranas for the people in the village. He will go to them, their houses, and he would read Puranas. He would take soul delight in that. And also he would sing bhajans and other things. Formal education, he went to school up to 14 years, but not regularly. He was not a regular student. His mother and father also did not insist him on going to school every day, because he would engage himself in this kind of activity. He would help his mother and father in the worship of the family deity Sri Rama. So he would not take much interest in formal education. He would not regularly go to school. Now and then he would go once in a week or twice in a week. Not that regular, but the parents, not like present day parents, they didn't push him into school. You go, I miss the school. He would spend his time in a more productive way, in a spiritual way. And so they did not insist on his going to school every day. But after his passing away, once actually his brother, by then he settled in Calcutta, Ramkumar, he came back to Kamarpukur and he saw actually Sri Ramakrishna was not going to school regularly. So this boy need to be mended. So he took him along with him to Calcutta. And then the story. And slowly actually he asked him to study some Sanskrit, and afterwards Ramkumar also passed away. Sri Ramakrishna joined as a priest of the Dakshineshwar Kali temple. And Rani Rasmani appointed him as the temple priest. All the mantras he had learnt from his brother Ramkumar. He himself was a priest and also a reasonable scholar in Sanskrit. So all the mantras he had by hearted from his brother. And so that's how actually he became the priest of Kali temple. How did he worship Mother Kali? Not like an ordinary archaka, not like an ordinary priest or pujari. His worship was an extraordinary kind of worship. He would totally get immersed in bhava. When he would offer Naivedya to mother, oh mother, take. Like a child, he will implore with her. It's not just an image, not just actually non-living entity. For him, actually, Divine Mother was real. Just as a physical mother, the real mother was there. She would take. Only thing is, I have to offer her with love. And with that, actually, she would implore. And with great bhava. And also he would sing songs from Ram Prasad and Kamalakanta. Ram Prasad and Kamalakanta were two other mystics who had experienced the Divine Mother, who had the vision of Divine Mother, who preceded Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Even now, actually, their songs are very popular across Bengal. And they sing during Durga Puja the songs of Ram Prasad and Kamalakanta. And Sri Ramakrishna also would sing those songs with full of pathos and bhava. And just like Annamacharya and Tyagaraja and Ramadas Kirtanas, full of Vedanta, full of highest spiritual philosophy, Kamalakant and also this Ram Prasad. So he would sing those songs and he would ask Mother, oh Mother, you reveal yourself to Ram Prasad, why don't you reveal yourself to me? You appeared before him, not that actually you are not there. Then again sometimes he would ask, it's all poetry? It's all actually figment of my imagination? Do you really exist? Do I have to stay like this only? So you'll never show yourself to me? So he would roll on the ground, he would weep, he would implore. And as the days rolled by, his heart's anguish became too unbearable for him. Too unbearable for him. He went on worshipping the Divine Mother for some months like that. And then one day, he was seized with that intense restlessness and anguish. Either I must have the vision of the mother and I must give up my body in the attempt. Then his eyes fell upon the sword there, the Divine Mother's hand, and he just ran in a frenzy to take out the sword and chop off his head. At that time he had the revelation. A luminous light, everything flew away, everything got dissolved into a homogeneous mass. A luminous light in torrents came in and overpowered him, and he fell unconscious. He fell unconscious. His nephew would see all this actually when he was worshipping the Divine Mother. He thought actually his uncle had gone crazy. And sometimes he would have to remind Sri Ramakrishna. He would remind Sri Ramakrishna, now the time is actually you have to offer Naivedya. You have to offer Naivedya, oh mama, oh uncle, offer Naivedya. So, in fact, the matter was reported to the temple authorities also. And many people thought actually there was some dereliction in the duty of a pujari because Sri Ramakrishna would lose his body consciousness so much. And it would be difficult for him to offer Naivedya and other things to Divine Mother. At one point of time, instead of putting flower into the hands of Mother, I would take it upon his head only. Because the distinction between Mother and he had vanished and he was in a kind of samadhi, he was kind of ecstasy. He was in a kind of ecstasy. And so, but it was reported to the manager and then he had taken it to the Mathur Babu, the owner of the estate, actually son-in-law of Rani Rasmani, who built the temple of Kali. And then Mathur Babu saw Sri Ramakrishna. I thought actually this is an extraordinary priest. He is not a normal pujari. He told his mother-in-law, we have got an extraordinary pujari, O mother-in-law, and the deity will awaken. So, the Mathur Babu had the insight. This man is not an ordinary man who is worshipping our Divine Mother. It is a great good fortune that we got a priest of this spiritual caliber. He doesn't just offer normal worship. He just puts his whole soul into the worship, and very soon the Divine Mother will be awakened in the image. That was actually his observation. Then he had instructed the manager and the temple, other people, officers of the temple, nobody should disturb Sri Ramakrishna. He would say, Baba, nobody should disturb Baba. Whatever the way you want to worship the Divine Mother, let him worship, that's all. So he had given him the full freedom. Though actually Hriday Ram, actually Sri Ramakrishna's nephew, he thought actually dereliction is happening because Sri Ramakrishna was not worshipping the Divine Mother in proper form because things were not being offered on time. But all that actually was set aside by the owner of the estate, Mathur Babu. And he was given the full freedom. And Sri Ramakrishna would get into ecstasy. And Divine Mother, he had that vision afterwards. He would go into Panchavati and do all kinds of sadhana. And later on actually he did how much he explored as a spiritual scientist. The entire realm of, that's why Vivekananda says actually, Sri Ramakrishna is the consummation of the spiritual aspirations of the entire Indian population for the last 5,000 years. The exact sentence they used is something like this, is the consummation of the 5,000 years of national religious life of India. How many people in 5,000 years must have practiced spiritual sadhanas? All that got condensed into one form, that was Sri Ramakrishna, he said. Before Sri Ramakrishna, we had so many galaxies of sages and saints. All their spiritual aspirations, all their longings, all their determination, all actually got condensed in one form, that was Sri Ramakrishna. So afterwards, he wanted to do more sadhana. Why? He had the vision of the Divine Mother now. He became totally fulfilled. But he greedily explored all other paths also. Is it this is the only path, or other paths which people are talking about, or other paths which scriptures describe? Are they also valid? Is there any truth about those paths? He just wanted to know. He just wanted to see. Now time is running out. And in India, we have, how many spiritual sadhanas are there? 64 tantras are there. We don't know, we Indians today, we don't know how rich we are spiritually. 64 tantras. And as soon as you utter the word tantra, and now today actually, a negative connotation is attached to the word tantra. Because we are only doing actually, practicing the degenerated form of tantras. Tantra actually was in practice at the time of Sri Ramakrishna, and it is, in Bengal and also in Assam and some parts of Orissa probably. Only in that part of the region. Tantra actually a dialogue between Shiva and Parvati. A lot of mantras actually that we worship here also, tantric mantras. But the only thing is, people had misunderstood. Tantra actually asks you to be sensual and at the same time you can aspire for spiritual realization. It's not like that. Sri Ramakrishna had proved through his sadhana and the guidance of Bhairavi Brahmani. So the right gurus came. Sri Rama had Guru Vasishtha and Lord Krishna had Guru Sandipani. So here Sri Ramakrishna also from time to time, not one guru actually. So Bhairavi Brahmani comes actually, initiates him into tantras. All the 64 tantras he had practiced. Tantra practices how it would be. First practice actually 5 skulls. You need a human skull, you need the skull of a bull, skull of a jackal, skull of a snake, skull of a dog. All the skulls would be around him, and then he initiated him into the mantra, and Sri Ramakrishna had done the sadhana, and he would get into ecstasy. All the 64 tantras he had practiced, and the guidance of the Bhairavi Brahmani. Sri Ramakrishna later on described that the Bhairavi Brahmani is a form of Yoga Maya. Yoga Maya, the Divine Mother herself actually came in that form. And afterwards he practiced this Madhura Bhava, Shanta Bhava, Dasya Bhava, and finally actually Advaita Sadhana he did under Totapuri, a great monk. He came from North India, and when he saw Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was actually absent-mindedly was sitting there in Dakshineshwar, the temple corridor. And he saw him, he saw the luminance, he saw the radiance on the face of the individual. And I saw that he is such a spiritual aspirant. He must be a great sadhaka. So then he goes to Sri Ramakrishna and asks, would you like to be initiated into Vedantic practice? Would you like to do Vedanta sadhana? Sri Ramakrishna said, I don't know, only my mother knows. Oh, then go and ask your mother and then come back to me. And Sri Ramakrishna goes to, and when she said that my mother knows, and Totapuri thought that his physical mother, but Sri Ramakrishna goes to Divine Mother, Kali, and asks, and Mother Kali said, he came for you only. Go and take instructions from him and do the sadhana. And Totapuri introduced him to the Advaitic sadhana in the Neti, na-iti, basically, not the body, not the mind. To get established in the truth, actually, you have to deny the untruth, that's all. Today we are attached to the body and mind. You just say no to body and mind and you get established in spiritual consciousness. But the problem is we are so deeply rooted in the body and mind. What are we? What am I if I am not the body and mind? What else I am? So the spiritual consciousness in us is very much dormant. And when Sri Ramakrishna, actually it was fully manifest. And so this Totapuri, when he initiated him into this Advaita sadhana, it did not take much time for Sri Ramakrishna to get into that Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the highest state of spiritual experience. He just in no time went into spiritual experience, into ecstasy, and for 3 days he was just like that. And Totapuri was totally surprised. That experience which took him 40 years of hard sadhana, and this man could get in a trice. And then he was just totally lost to his body and mind, no external consciousness. So in the hut in which actually Sri Ramakrishna was doing sadhana, Totapuri locks it from outside, thinking that he would come out of that state after a few minutes. Minutes passed, hours passed, 3 days passed, still Sri Ramakrishna was totally absorbed in. Totapuri went and saw, no heartbeat, no inhalation, exhalation also. It's just there. No heartbeat, no inhalation, exhalation. Had he brought a doctor, the doctor would have declared him as dead. But he was in sitting posture only. He was sitting posture only. But there were no palpitations in the heart and no inhalation and exhalation. That is samadhi, the highest spiritual state. He was in a sitting posture only. Then he went on saying actually, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om. Later on Sri Ramakrishna also used to say, whenever I would go into ecstasy, because it is samadhi, ecstasy is nirvikalpa samadhi, highest state. The time will disappear there. I may be in ecstasy for years together also I can get into ecstasy. So he would tell his disciples actually, you would just remind me, you would bring me to normal consciousness, you just utter divine name in my ears. So you utter divine name in my ears, I will come back to normal consciousness, means body consciousness. So Totapuri goes and then he would utter Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om and brings him back to normal consciousness and expresses his surprise at the caliber of this spiritual sadhaka. And then on later on, because in Advaita they don't believe in incarnations. Advaita, they don't believe in incarnation. They only believe in karma and then you are attained to the highest, that's all. But Sri Ramakrishna's, the purity, whatever that he focused on, his mind completely got absorbed in that in no time, which was spiritual sadhana. Islamic sadhana he did, Christian sadhana he did. And then he declared that all are valid paths to reach God. There are so many paths. All paths are valid. You just take up the path that actually suits you and just go deep into it and get to realization. Later on he would tell, in his teachings actually, he said, somehow reach the top of the house, roof of the house, whether you go by staircase or by ladder or actually through a rope actually. That choice is left to you. But to know your spiritual nature, to know that you are the soul by experience, that should be the goal and objective of life. The sooner you attain to that, the better for you. Because this body actually is the greatest instrument with which you can make the experiment. This is the laboratory in which actually you have to make the experiment and reach the divine. The source of the universe is throbbing in you. So that samadhi state cannot be explained in words. Our rishis have understood that exploration into the world external just for a little physical comfort, because body will fall dead one day. Otherwise I would have gone. Had the body been a real thing, had it been an eternal thing, okay, we have 1 lakh years of life, let us say. This body I will continue with it for 1 lakh years. Then you can go for physical comfort and external. But today it is there, tomorrow it's not there. It is so fragile an entity as a physical body. You just see how much of suffering is there in the world. And if something happens to our body, it's just an aggregate of parts. Some part will cave in, some part will break, some part will actually get damaged, something will happen. And the pain actually, that so much of pain is just an aggregate of parts. Everything is a part. And also it's not that actually we'll keep the same vigor. And senses actually, they don't work continuously, the same vigor won't be there. Sarvendriyani jarayanti tejaha, Yama says to Nachiketa in Kathopanishad. The strength and vigor of the indriyas we lose. The sight also slowly actually fading away. The ear actually, the ability, olfactory sense, this sense, ability to hear will come down. Every sense actually is dwindling gradually. So as we grow older, the body becomes weaker and weaker, and senses become weaker and weaker. Even the things that we want to enjoy, we won't be able to enjoy. That is the fate of the physical body. And that's why our rishis and our forefathers, they told us, they wanted us to use this body for some yoga sadhana. And Sri Ramakrishna says the easiest yoga sadhana for this age is Naradhiya Bhakti. Repeat God's name, what else you can do? But that is good enough sadhana to help you progress towards the truth. Good enough sadhana, he says, only you need to have faith, that's all. So he, that's why today's topic is spiritual phenomenon. He had realized the truth. There was no need for him to practice other sadhanas. There was no need for him absolutely to explore other paths, but just to set an example to the world. All these paths are valid. You don't have to quarrel over which path is superior. You just take the path that suits your temperament and then do sadhana and experience the truth. Experiencing the truth is important. Vivekananda would tell later on again and again, being and becoming, not just actually intellectual assent. Giving an intellectual assent, it doesn't suffice. You have to have the experience. If you say that sweet, 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 it's only a word. You have to taste it, you have to experience it. Right? You have to experience the divine. And for that, sadhana is required. So he had done this Advaita sadhana also to his heart's content, all the sadhanas, and then he would get into the truth in no time. This way he is a spiritual phenomenon. In the annals of spiritual history of India, you will not come across a person like Sri Ramakrishna. That's why Vivekananda named him as Avadhara Varishta. Saraschandra Chakravarti, one of the disciples of Vivekananda, one day asked him, what do you think about Sri Ramakrishna? Do you consider him as an incarnation? And then Vivekananda asks him again, what do you mean by an incarnation? Then Sharachandra says, like Rama, Krishna, Chaitanya, Buddha, Vivekananda's reply was, he is more than that. He is more than that, he says. Because when the Lord actually, the Absolute incarnated as Rama, we have to do so many things, right? Not just spiritual sadhana. No? Rama is a king. Politics, you have to do. So Kaikeyi, he became victim of politics, and then he had to go to forest, and then he had to bring his wife back, kidnapped wife. How much? Where was the time for him to do all the spiritual sadhana? He had experienced the truth of the Supreme Being. And Krishna, how much of politics he had to do? Duryodhana, deal with people like Jarasandha, Duryodhana, Kamsa. So much of fighting he had to do. But in this incarnation, only sadhana avatara you can tell. One after another, another sadhana. Tantra, this bhakti sadhanas, Advaita sadhanas of other phase, through all that he had attained to the truth. In no time he would get into truth. And he said, Sri Ramakrishna said, why are you doing all these sadhanas? Because you have experienced the truth. He said, when you live by the side of a sea, on the shore of a sea, you will have the temptation to explore what is there in the sea, right? So many gems there, say, in the sea. So he was by the side of the Divine Mother, the spiritual sea, the sea of consciousness. And he has expressed his desire. We would express his desire to Divine Mother now and then. Oh, I want to explore that. I want to see that sadhana. Okay, my child. She would actually make the arrangements for him. And he would get into that ecstasy. And in fact, it's a large part of his life, a major portion of his life went only in this sadhana, experiencing the truth to different paths. Only towards the fag end of life, for 4 or 5 years only, he had taken up this spiritual ministry, sharing the thoughts, sharing his experience, sharing his spiritual wisdom that he had gained through all these practices with the society. He had done it for a very brief period of time, not for a very long period of time. Probably, I think from 1881 onwards, 1881 to 1886, 5 years or 6 years only. So, what are the central teachings of Sri Ramakrishna? In fact, you can call him a spiritual encyclopedia, a spiritual phenomenon, a scientist who has explored the dimension called spirituality in all its aspects. Bhakti, Jnana, Yoga, and Karma. That's why Sri Ramakrishna Vivekananda says that. So other incarnations were great, but in terms of character, and Sri Ramakrishna, he says, transcends all the previous incarnations, he said. And in terms of teaching, he was more liberal, more original, and his teachings are more progressive than the teachings of all the previous incarnations. He says Sri Ramakrishna is the spring of this phase of Earth's religious life and its impulses. Vasanta Rutu, he says. If somebody wants to become spiritual and you read Vivekananda, you will experience the Vasanta Rutu for you. The spring of this phase of Earth's religious impulses. One spray, Vivekananda's language is very beautiful, measured words, because he was a child of the Divine Mother, right? Mother Saraswati was sitting on his tongue, and she spoke through him, not one word extra, one word less. He says, one spray from this full ocean of spirituality can make gods of men. One spray from this full ocean of spirituality, if realized, can make gods of men. You don't have to take Sri Ramakrishna whole of spirituality. A little, that's enough for us. It would make gods of men, he says. That much of depth, that much of breadth, both are there. Today we modern educated Indians, particularly we Hindus we are very Catholic, very broad-minded. We all know that all religions lead to the same goal. Okay, we are very tolerant. Tolerance actually is in our own blood only. We are very broad-minded, but we have given up. There is no depth in us. We are only holding on to the surface of the religion. We are only holding on to the husk. We are not actually holding on to the kernel. We are not going deep into the kernel. A little pilgrimage, some ritual. We are totally contented, not getting deep into the sadhana and not experimenting with this laboratory. The way Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa did, at least 1/16 of what he had done, if we do, we would get mukti, we would get realization. But for that, renunciation is the basis. Sri Ramakrishna's renunciation is remarkable, unheard of in the spiritual annals of this country. Never touched money. So, to demonstrate his renunciation during his sadhana period, one day he took few gold coins into his hand and also a little clod of earth in another hand. And then both he threw into the Ganges. And he said, Taka Mati, Mati Taka. Taka Mati, Mati Taka. So, money and this clod of earth, they are not different, one and the same. They are not different, one and the same. That was the degree of dispassion and renunciation he had. He never touched money in life, but had the highest experience of life. That's why actually this life has the ability and the potency to give a different direction to human civilization. Today there is so much of greed, the competition. So everybody feels insecure because of this, right? All that will go away if everybody gets introduced to Sri Ramakrishna's life. That's why Vivekananda says, in vain is that life which cannot appreciate Sri Ramakrishna, he says, which doesn't get introduced to the life of Sri Ramakrishna. He must have been living in vain, he says. So you need to get exposed to his life and his teachings and his thoughts. Everybody, if I can have the highest experience of life by giving up, by not touching anything, then why should I not explore that? We don't have that much of renunciation, but at least we will develop contentment, right? That material things that I have more than what Sri Ramakrishna had, right? That's sufficient. So let me explore myself. Let me become a sadhaka. Let me become a yogi. Let me explore my inner dimension. Let me see what I have within me. Let me know what supports my body and mind. Body and mind are jada, insentient. The Chaitanya is something different from these two. That spirit animates these two. The spirit is only peeping through these two, the matter. Mind is also matter, thought is also matter. Only in this culture we know that. There is something behind the thought, that which animates thought, which makes mind function, which makes thought happen. Without that, it cannot happen. That is soul, that is consciousness, that is God. And that we must bring into our experience. And these are all the role models. They are all the examples. These are all actual lamp posts, guide posts. The lives of these great incarnations will be able to guide us. Only in India, only on this soil. Such people of extraordinary spiritual caliber are born again and again time. Maybe in other cultures, in other civilizations, they're born once in a millennia. But here actually, in every century we have. But Sri Ramakrishna, that's why Vivekananda says this. In terms of Catholicity, in terms of renunciation, in terms of the knowledge that he had embodied and devotion that he had embodied, he has actually gone beyond all the previous records. Absolute renunciation. Mathur Babu, the owner of that temple, Kali temple, one day, in the hearing of Sri Ramakrishna, he was talking to Sri Ramakrishna's nephew Hridayram. See, today I am there, I am taking care of the material needs of Baba, Sri Ramakrishna, Thakur. And tomorrow I will not be there, who will take care of him? So I will bequeath a small property to him. Okay? I will register it in his name. That's all. Sri Ramakrishna overheard that. He did not tell directly to Sri Ramakrishna. He just overheard from a distance. Then he rushes to that Mathur Babu and says, "You fool, you want to make me a worldly man?" You see, somebody wants to donate your property. And then he says and goes to him and scolds him. "You want to make me a worldly man? Do you think I will crave for these things? You want to put me in bondage?" And that would be the pain of a person who developed that kind of renunciation. Because as soon as you touch money and material things, your consciousness will come to the body level. Only the physical body requires all these things, right? Because he was the super conscious state, right? A realm of the spirit, experiencing the infinite, enjoying the absolute bliss, which is Paramarthika Ananda, which cannot be described in words. And somebody who is enjoying that infinite ocean of bliss, and to bring him down to the material level, a mundane level, would be painful for him. So he would scold. And so this Mathur Babu goes and offers it to, Sri Ramakrishna's mother. I thought anyway the child is actually an exceptional child. At least let me offer some property to his mother, and Chandramani Devi. She was a very old woman at the time. And she said, "Oh, what I want, whatever the basic needs, minimum needs that you are taking care of me. So I don't need anything." So he insisted that at least you seek something, O mother. You consider me also as your child. The Mathur Babu asked that to Sri Ramakrishna's mother, Chandramani Devi. And then she thought, she scratched her brain for a considerable period of time, and then she comes. "Just give me one anna worth of tobacco leaf, because I have tooth pain. I just want to burn that and, make it into powder, and I don't want to apply it to my tooth." That's what she asked of that rich man, Mathur Babu. He was very rich. He could have given an estate if she wanted. She did not seek. And then Mathur Babu was in tears, and he said, "As the mother, so the son." Right? She had that kind of dispassion. And the son actually, she gave birth to an exceptional son. And this actually, that's why I'm saying that this life is very important for the present generation, for the present civilization, human civilization. Nations are in competition with other nations. Individuals are in competition with other individuals. All that will go away. All what you are seeking basically is happiness. Oh man, you are by nature bliss, not happiness. Within you is all the happiness. Compared to that happiness that you get through this money and material things, is only fractional. There cannot be any comparison. Somehow you have become entangled in matter. You have come into bondage. This body and the physical and the psychological, these cases, their outer actually clocks there. Their appendages, their upadhis, Sanskrit word is upadhi, their adjuncts. You are not that. They are limiting you. They are limiting your infinite nature. You are born in the image of God, just as our Father is. You are also infinite. Our Father is infinite. We are all the children of consciousness. Amrutasya putra. This word the Upanishads have declared. And Sri Ramakrishna declared it in the modern period for us. See, all the turmoil, all the suffering, all the conflict, all the psychological distortion, all this is because you have not read a life like this. It's very important. This land is a land of renunciation. Not that actually we don't have the brains to explore the external world and create technology and material comfort. We have, but we don't want it because that will enslave us to the mind. That will not take us to, towards the truth. That will not give us immortality. So anyway, material things are there, we will enjoy. But that should not become the sole purpose and objective of life. Providing for the physical body, how long the body lasts. And people are accumulating things as if they would be here for a millennia. As if this body would continue for a millennia. Many people have accumulated that. So the thing that they have accumulated, for that actually to enjoy all that, they need a millennia. They need at least 1,000 years. But 1,000 years of life you don't have. You need to understand. You are mortal. You are coming closer to death by the day. Even when you celebrate birthdays, you actually need to understand that one more year passed. There should be actually a day of remorse, in fact. You should not have one more year actually spent. So that means you are coming closer to death. Yama is actually approaching you fast. So that is the level of ignorance. We all know this, but yet we do the same thing again and again. Without thinking, without reflecting, without using our brains. As Swamiji said, Sri Ramakrishna is the living commentary to the Vedas and its aim. If you want to understand the essence of the Vedas, Vedanta, Bhagavata and other Puranas, he writes in one of the letters to Swami Shivananda, another brother, monastic disciple, that you need to read the life of Sri Ramakrishna. If you want to understand the essence of the Vedanta, essence of the Vedas, essence of Puranas like Bhagavata and other Puranas, you have to read this life. Then only you will understand, he says. His life is actually that infinite searchlight, he says. Infinite searchlight thrown upon the whole body of religious thought of India. And using that searchlight, so you will understand the religious thought of India, religious philosophy of India, spiritual philosophy of India, he says. That is actually Sri Ramakrishna, according to Vivekananda. What are his central teachings? Sri Ramakrishna's teachings are very simple. He says, there is God, but we don't see God because of Maya. That's what Vedanta says. What is Maya according to Sri Ramakrishna? I and mine is Maya. Very simple. I and mine. Telugu, Nenu, Nadi. I and mine. This is Maya, he says. You get rid of that and you get out of the Maya. And then you are in truth. As simple as that. Through beautiful drishtantas, parables actually teaches. When you go in rainy season into villages and there, you see on ponds, the scum will be there, the algae, that covers it completely. You see actually it is like grass. From outside it appears like grass. Okay, you don't see water, but you remove little of that algae and you see water below, right? Like that, Maya actually has covered our vision of God, our vision of truth. So we see only the world of name and form, which is unreal. When you touch consciousness here, then you get into that homogeneous state of consciousness. Then afterwards, when you come down from that state, the whole universe you see as a reflection of the truth. You will simultaneously be able to see the matter, the material things, the world of name and form, and also consciousness behind. The canvas you see and also the painting. Now today you see only the painting and you don't see the canvas. Painting cannot exist without canvas, right? And something you have to draw. Today we see only the painting, but we don't see the canvas. You'll be able to see that when you get to the truth. And so Sri Ramakrishna says, you must live in the world like lotus leaf gives the example. It is there in Yoga Vashishta also. Vashishta told it to Rama because he was that Rama in that incarnation, right? Like lotus leaf. Lotus leaf actually stays in water, but it doesn't get moistened by water. So you can live in the world, but the world should not enter into you. That means you should lead a detached life where everything is vanishing. Okay? Body is not there. So even if you want, actually you can't hold on to things. Yama actually snatches, forcefully takes us away from this world, though we don't like, though we hate him, though we want to keep him at bay, and he will come one day. So, why then attachment? Such an intense attachment for things. If you don't have attachment, from where the suffering comes? You just tell me. So, just like lotus leaf, you ought to live in this world. And he says, if you take one step towards the Lord in this age, he will take 10 steps towards you. One step you take towards him, and he will take 10 steps towards you. In other ages, in other actually yugas, he never did it. All the steps you had to take to reach him. But the advantage of this Kali Yuga, Bhagavata also says that Lord is extraordinarily compassionate now because he knows our bondage. He knows our struggles. He is after all our father, our mother. How can he be hard-hearted? He is very considerate. So many concessions he has given, but we don't want to make use of those concessions also. That is our problem. So much relaxation, so much of concession. One step you take towards me, I will take 10 steps towards you. I will walk 10 steps towards you, and I will give you the helping hand. So tomorrow we will be celebrating with all solemnity and eclat Sri Ramakrishna's birthday. So why we celebrate his birthdays? Because we need to remember his life, because it's extraordinary life, because we are all spiritual sadhakas. There is nobody who is actually not a spiritual sadhaka. There is nobody who doesn't want eternal peace and happiness. Everybody wants it. So we are exploring the material world, we don't get it, and afterwards we'll have to come to this path sooner or later. Everybody has to come. So these lives are relevant to everybody. That's the reason we celebrate. And in our culture, in India, we revere these spiritual personalities. We know their worth. Only this race has the ability to recognize such spiritual personalities. In that way, because there is spirituality in us, we will be able to recognize spiritual personality. If there is no spirituality here, you cannot recognize a spiritual personality. That's why God only takes birth again and again in this land, in this culture, because people have the ability to understand spiritual people, to appreciate spiritual thought. So we shall stop here for today. That's why Sri Ramakrishna is a spiritual phenomenon, is not just a spiritual person. Just 2 minutes meditation, then we shall disperse.